Bukola Bello brings over 7 years' experience in administrative, nonprofit, and state government with expertise in research and statistical economic analyses pursuant to pension legislation. Prior to joining the Center for Tax and Budget Accountability, Bukola worked as a pension analyst for the Commission on Government Forecasting and Accountability, CAGFA, a legislative commission with the Illinois General Assembly. During her tenure at CAGFA, she co-wrote and authored 7 published retirement reports, including the first ever published handbook of Illinois pension case law, and submitted over 98 analytical summaries of legislation affecting the Illinois Pension Code. She has served on the Leadership Springfield Board of Directors, the Positive Options Referrals and Alternatives Board of Directors, and numerous committees as a member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. She also holds membership in the Chicago chapter of the National Association of Securities Professionals. Bukola received a Master of Arts with honors in legal studies with a graduate certificate in law for human services and social work. She received a Bachelor of Arts in political science from the University of Illinois at Champaign-Urbana. Her research background includes presenting qualitative data to doctoral candidates at the University of Michigan at Ann Arbor and assisting with an associate professor's publication entitled Two Warring Ideals: Double Consciousness, Dialogue, and African-American Patriotism post 9/11. Her work also includes various reports at the behest of state senators and representatives. Let's welcome Bukola Bello.
Good morning. I want to make sure that everyone can hear me. I tend to project my voice and enunciate, so this will be good for all of us. My name is Bukola Bello, and I am the director of the Illinois Retirement Security Initiative with the Center for Tax and Budget Accountability. I want to thank all of you for inviting me to come and speak today. I definitely want to thank Meryl and Dick Johnson and Linda Brookhart, who all made the initial ask. And so I am here to engage you all in lively discussion. Hopefully towards the end we'll have a very spirited Q&A. And by the time you leave here, I'll be able to answer that #1 burning question that I get from many individuals who are near retirement or individuals who have already retired. And that question is, how secure are my pensions? So before I begin, I want to give you a little bit of background over what I do and who I work for. How many of you are familiar with CTBA, by a show of hands? Okay, that's good, very good. The Center for Tax and Budget Accountability is a research and advocacy-based bipartisan organization located right here in Chicago, Illinois. We specialize in public policy implementation in a few key areas: education, healthcare, workforce development, making sure that taxes are progressive and not hindering those that are low-income earners. And my personal favorite, the world's sexiest subject for some and a natural sleep inducer for others, pensions. So as the director of the Illinois Retirement Security Initiative, which we commonly refer to as IRSI, my job is twofold. Hopefully you've received our mission and structure handout, which I will hold up. Make sure everyone has a chance to dig it out. And I look at my job as one of common sense, and we all know that common sense is not common. My job as the director is to make sure that I'm the voice of reason behind an arsenal of research. From the mission and structure sheet that you have in front of you, you will note that our mission is twofold. Number one, to make sure that public employee benefits are adequately funded. So the group that you're seeing in front of you is on the forefront of making sure that appropriations are going where they need to be in terms of public employee benefits, that certified amounts are actually being met by the General Assembly, and that our legislators and general public understand the public policy implications behind borrowing for the pensions, behind skipping pension payments. We do our very, very best, again, to be the voice of reason. And I'm proud to say that through a diverse effort from the steering committee and the advisory council, we've done a good job of making sure that legislators are aware of their actions 10, 20, or even 30 years from now. In addition to the unique structure of the advisory council and the steering committee, our next goal is to make sure that Illinois is doing its best to attract and retain the highest quality workers possible to the public sector. We all know right now, based on the headlines, that there has been a huge exodus of state and local employees leaving government based on early retirement incentives, based on a fear of what is going to happen with their retirement benefits. And our job is to make sure that we're not spreading panic. The newspapers do that, and they do that quite well, and we don't need to encourage that. So we want to make sure that we're not only empowering you to know the truth of what is going to happen to your benefits, but we're also doing our best to empower the media. We all understand that sensationalized headlines sell, but it is possible for the truth to sell as well. And so that's one of our main components behind this particular group. Again, my job is twofold: to make sure that I'm working at the behest of the committee, working with members of the General Assembly, working with the media and the press. And so, now that I've told you a little bit about what I do and who I work for, I think it's important to get into the meat and potatoes of this particular discussion. And before I address the attacks on your benefits, I think it's really important to evaluate and address why these attacks are even happening. I like to refer to this portion of the discussion as the haves and the have-nots. So there are groups, high-powered groups, and particular individuals amongst the state who have been following the trends of what is going on currently in Illinois. They have been able to make a very distinct correlation between the downward negative financial spiral of the state and the public sector. They have drawn and made the connection that the reason that Illinois is experiencing high financial lows is because of public employee benefits. Now, they've been able to spread these rumors. They've been able to gain monumental ground with their campaign. How many of you are familiar with the Illinois is Broke campaign? So they've been able to add fuel to the fire based on a few variables that have been happening throughout the state. Number one, unemployment. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, otherwise known as BLS, the unemployment rate for Illinois actually fell 2 percentage points in January of 2011 to 9%. So what does this mean? This means that even though the number of individuals who are currently unemployed is on a steady decline, you still have quite a significant percentage of individuals who cannot find work and who are unemployed. And for many, that is a serious problem, serious enough for them to turn and look at the jobs of individuals that are held in the public sector. They've associated public sector work with longevity and security that they do not have. In addition, our current deficit, Illinois' current budget deficit for fiscal year 2012 is $7 billion. And as a disclaimer, I do work for the Center for Tax and Budget Accountability. It is not my job at this particular juncture within this discussion to argue for or against a tax increase. Right, wrong, or indifferent, had members of the Illinois General Assembly not passed the tax increase during lame duck session in January, the budget deficit for fiscal year 2012 would have been $16 billion. Our state is still in the red despite the tax increase and despite the little over $7 billion in new revenue that we're going to be receiving. In addition, our unpaid bills. Illinois is a bit of a deadbeat when it comes to its financial obligations and making sure that its debts are covered and paid. Illinois has a little over $6 billion in unpaid bills that have carried over from fiscal year 2011 onto fiscal year 2012. That means that there are individuals, particularly those that are providing essential services to the state, who have not been paid. So what happens when you're not paid as an employer? You can't pay your employees. You can't pay your utilities. And not only are you affecting the individuals who are immediately connected to your business, but you're affecting their family members as well. And once again, these individuals are looking at what is going on in state government, and here's something that they're hearing over and over and over again: our unfunded pension liability. So, the truth of the matter is that Illinois' current unfunded pension liability is $85.6 billion and growing. That does not include retiree health care obligations, which if you add that to the number of liability that we have, you get up into the hundreds of billions of dollars. And that's, again, a serious problem. So not only are we in the red, but you've had individuals that have been able to successfully mobilize other individuals who have been affected by the state's negative fiscal impact. And they've been able to say, okay, Illinois is broke, and these public benefits are the result of it. How many of you have heard that public employee benefits are overly generous? Raise your hand. How many of you have heard of the term Cadillac-esque benefits? Judging from what I saw in the parking lot, the majority of you should have Cadillacs. However, I did not see that, so we all know there's a little bit of mistruth to that statement. In addition, how many of you have heard of the term double dipper? So based on these misnomers or these misconceptions, campaigns like Illinois is broke, individuals who spearhead these private sector businesses, these organizational groups that have really picked up steam, there's a reason why. So my job today is to engage you in a discussion as to, number one, what is the truth? Number two, how can we fight these misconceptions? And what exactly is going on within the General Assembly that will tell you that your pensions are either safe or possibly falling by the side? So now that I've given you the most positive fiscal outlook that I can possibly give you, let's talk a little bit about what is going on within our General Assembly. As I said before, there are individuals and groups that are picking up quite a bit of steam in terms of promoting their campaign and their own legislative agenda. These particular individuals have been given a warm seat of welcome at the table by many legislators who are looking for fiscal solutions. Again, right right, wrong, or indifferent, you really have to pay attention to what is going on within the General Assembly. And as a disclaimer, I'm going to be speaking in terms of generalities in regards to the legislation. I've been told by one of my board members from SUAA that there are particular bills that are being heard right now in the General Assembly that don't necessarily affect your membership. If you would like details on sponsors or bill numbers, by all means, please visit the SUAA website. So this is a plug for SUAA, www.suaa.org for more information on legislation that particularly affects you as university professionals and employees. But in terms of generalities and what has been happening in the General Assembly, it's been quite an interesting legislative session. Currently, we have quite a few ambitious legislators, freshmen, frosh, who are doing their best to make their mark on the General Assembly. That's a great thing for their constituents who elected to put them there. The problem is that many don't quite understand or haven't quite grasped the public policy implications behind the legislation that they're sponsoring. In addition to the new members and the bills that they're carrying, there have been a significant amount of bills that have been introduced into the General Assembly. Over 6,235 bills have been introduced this session. That's astronomical. That's a very large amount. That means you have organizations who are monitoring between 200 to 250 to 300 bills at one time. And making sure that you're working with the sponsors of this legislation while also monitoring the other many bills that he or she may have has been quite a task. So, in addition to the 6,235 bills that have been introduced, 1/3 of those bills are shell bills. Shell bills, for the most part, are virtually harmless. However, they have the potential, when used effectively by the sponsor, to provide quite an impact depending on what is actually in that legislation. And for those of you that are not familiar, a shell bill is an empty bill, a bill that is void of any legislative language, or as some have called it, it's a naked bill. In order to clothe said bill, a sponsor will add amendatory language. The bill will then be filed and it will become it'll be on the same level as another bill. What typically happens is leadership will hold about 20, 30, 40, 50 shell bills, and they'll pull those bills out when they want to stop something from significant from happening, or when they want something significant to actually happen and run immediately. So apart from the game of monitoring regular legislation, there's always a threat of a shell bill coming along and doing something completely asinine to what we know is good public policy. So let me start with one of the main issues on the table, reform, pension reform. Not only was the pension reform from last year not enough for many members, members have received pushback from their constituents saying that they need to dig deeper. They need to dig harder. They need to reform the pensions of current and existing workers. How many current employees do I have in this room? So there are legislators who have introduced various bills with the intention of reducing your particular pension. So that's the bad news. The good news is that these bills have been fought hard and those battles have been won. The argument that has been relied upon again and again and again is that it's unconstitutional. Period, point blank, end of story. Article 8 of Section 5 of the Illinois Constitution is very, very clear. It states that any reduction to pensions are looked upon as an infringement or a diminishment, of which, if one were to reduce said pension, it would be looked at as unconstitutional. So what we have now, we have lawmakers who have created two tiers, two systems, one for current employees, another for new hires, and that law, Public Act 960889, which I'm sure you're all familiar with, went into effect January 1st of 2011. The new legislative agenda, legislative thrust, is to make sure that there's parity between the tiers. So individuals who are now entering into the second tier are looking at a reduction in benefits. It's caused a bit of a shakeup administratively to monitor these various benefits and monitor who's coming in, who's going out. But it's also caused a bit of havoc in terms of having members who are part of the first tier join the second tier. So I'm sure you all have heard of Tom Cross's House Bill 149, by show of hands. Okay, somewhat. House Bill 149 is not a reason to panic. It's not a reason to go out and retire, but it is something that you should take notice of. This particular piece of legislation, which is still in the works, looks at creating more parity between the two-tiered systems, Tier 1 and Tier 2. There are three options within the legislation that quite simply reduce benefits for current and existing workers. They either require an employee to contribute more out of their check. So essentially you're contributing more for less, which we've argued is unconstitutional. It would require an individual to choose voluntarily to join Tier 2, which by all means, why would you want to join another tier where your benefits are reduced, but that's an option for you. The other option is to transfer your particular benefit into a defined contribution or 401k benefit. Again, this legislation is still being worked out between the leaders. Speaker Madigan has made it quite clear that he is open and amenable to Leader Cross's suggestions in House Bill 149. And something of note is that Leader Cross, within an op-ed piece that he authored for the Chicago Tribune, made it very, very clear that his legislation was based off of a proposal from the Commercial Club of Chicago, which works very closely with the Civic Federation. So we have to make sure that when we're looking at these proposals, we understand the genesis of said legislation. It comes from this particular group. They want to do this particular thing with the pensions, and the end goal is to make sure that your benefits are reduced. But again, the good news is that there has been significant pushback from the organizations listed on the ERC mission and structure sheet. And again, time and time again, we've refuted those arguments with it's unconstitutional and you're gearing up for a fight if you pass this particular legislation. In addition, another issue that has gained quite a bit of traction in terms of discussion has been a reduction to the COLA, the cost of living adjustment or the cost of living allowance. It has been argued, yet again, that a COLA is a form of a retirement benefit and such cannot be reduced. And if it were to be reduced, it would be unconstitutional. So the key word here is, you're right, a little louder. The key word is, a little bit louder. The key word is, very good. I have to make sure that you're awake. And this is a way to do that. So, once again, we've argued that a COLA is a form of a retirement benefit. Various legislation that has been introduced has made it out of committee. Some legislation has died on the floor. Some have actually passed, but the most important thing is whether or not it will be picked up in the Senate. President John Cullen has made it very, very clear that he does not feel like any reduction to current and existing workers in terms of their pensions are constitutional. So that's one advocate that is very much aware of what is going on. So on the flip side, an issue where there is no legislation, but it has been heavily discussed, is taxing retirement income. So based on one of the handouts that you have, I'm going to ask you to look at the ERC pension cliff notes, taxing retirement income. When this issue came up, it was actually Senate President Cullerton who brought up the fact in committee and at a speaking engagement with the City Club of Chicago that this could be an option. He was very clear in making it plain that he wanted bipartisan support on this issue, and based on the Republicans that I've spoken to in the House, they're not touching it. Absolutely no way, no how. So it's interesting who your allies are going to be depending on what the subject matter is. But as you can see from this particular handout, it's very basic in terms of why is taxing retirement income even up for discussion? Mind you, we still have a current deficit, we have unpaid bills, we have this huge unfunded liability. We're still in the red. So we're still looking at options for revenue. And unfortunately, this happens to be a particular option. Now, if you look down to how much revenue would the state actually receive from taxing pension income, you'll see that there's a bit of a problem here. If we tax retirement income over $50,000, you'll see that that generates $382.9 million. That's hardly going to make a dent in the $6 billion in unpaid bills. That's not going to make any type of significant change in the current deficit. It will bring in a small amount of revenue, but then what? What you end up doing is you end up angering a very popular, a very vocal, and a very active voting bloc. That's what you end up doing. Now, if you increase the amount that you would tax, taxing retirement income over $100,000 would generate $118 million. Again, that doesn't make a dent in the deficit. It doesn't make a dent in terms of our unpaid bills. It brings in a small amount of revenue. And if you flip over the sheet, you'll notice that there are 3 states, and I'll be very, very specific here. There are 3 states within the union that do not tax public or private pension income. Those states are Illinois, Mississippi, and Pennsylvania. Now, I will make note and I will acknowledge that there are actually 10 states that do not tax pension income. And from the bottom, you'll see that those states are currently Alabama, Hawaii, Illinois, Kansas, Louisiana, Massachusetts, Michigan, Mississippi, New York, and Pennsylvania. So what does that mean? Well, the public policy implication behind these particular states that don't tax pension income is that if Illinois were to implement taxing retirement income, you're looking at individuals who will pick up and move. What does that do for our state? And already individuals are feeling the relieved pressure of the recession that is currently leaving, but you have individuals who are going to hold on to their pension income. And so you have many retirees who are already mobile. They go between Florida and Illinois or various other states at will. And so the problem with this type of policy is that you're looking at another exodus within the state of individuals who have the option to pick up and go. It also must be stated that public service providers are not all millionaires. The weighted average benefit across all 5 state-funded systems is $26,000. $26,000. So who are we really going to be taxing, and why, when there are other issues that the state needs to really focus on and put their attention on? So in terms of empowering you, if this issue is to come up again, at least you have unbiased, fun-filled facts that you can use as a retort to refute any type of response that you may get that would be contrary to why we would want to actually tax retirement income. Another issue that has gained quite a bit of steam currently is the issue of retiree health insurance. How many of you have heard of the discussions that have been happening currently, spearheaded by Senator Schoenberg regarding retiree health care? Okay, very, very good. So you know retiree health care is on the chopping block. For several months, there have been various meetings held at the behest of the Commission on Government Forecasting and Accountability to evaluate what will happen if retirees end up picking up a greater share of the health insurance of their health insurance benefits, that particular portion. And currently, we're not exactly sure how this will affect various sectors because not everybody's healthcare plan is the same. In fact, what applies to members of TRIP, the Teachers Retirement Insurance Program, does not necessarily correspond or comply with what happens in CIP, the College Insurance Program. So what we know is that the discussions that have taken place have really involved a lot of testimony, a lot of numbers have been run, and there will be a final report produced by the Commission on Government Forecasting and Accountability on April 25th. So the numbers should be finalized by then, and we'll be able to know what will actually happen in moving forward. The largest group that has actually been targeted have been members of SERS, the State Employees Retirement System. SERS currently has over 81,000 retirees, 93% of which do not pay anything towards their health care. So we know based upon these numbers that they're really looking to offset costs from individuals who are not contributing anything towards their health care. Is this a current reason to be scared? Is this a current reason to think the sky is falling and that state government just doesn't care about anybody? No, this is not it. Again, there have been discussions to evaluate what will happen. There has been no legislation that has been introduced either by President Cullerton or Senator Schoenberg or any House members regarding what will happen with retirement health care. So again, I'll preface that report will be available April 25th. So this brings up the question then, okay, Bukola, you've listed all of these things out, you've listed out the deficit, you've listed out some generalities with legislation, you've listed out what's being discussed, but how exactly do I know if my pension is secure or not? So I'm going to say that the answer is analogous to what happens in war. Essentially, what happens in war is that it's better to lose a few battles than to lose the overall war. And what has happened is there has been give and take in terms of the battles that have been won and the battles that have been lost. Essentially, the current two-tier structure, by many, was a battle that was lost. And by the looks on some of your faces, I can see that you agree with me. By the looks on some others, I should probably talk louder. So again, there have been quite a few battles. One particular battle that is going to be extremely important and will determine whether or not we win this war is what happens when a particular pension reform bill ends up passing the House, passes the Senate, and the governor signs it. What happens then? Any takers? Say it again. It becomes a law, but it also, I heard, becomes a lawsuit. It goes to court, and that's where the real final showdown will begin. What you have to understand is that judges are currently a part of this system. They have their own system, the judges' retirement system. There has been legislation that has been passed that would turn new judges, that would roll them over into SERS, the State Employees Retirement System. So you're looking at individuals on the bench who essentially are going to be asked to vote against their own interests. And that's key because you have judges who have the most lucrative pensions out of all of the other 4 state-funded systems. Judges make more than General Assembly members, judges make more than teachers, judges make more than university professionals, university employees. Judges make the most. So what you're essentially asking a judge to do is someone who has committed a significant portion of their career to reaching that seat, to essentially, they know what their pension is going to be, you're asking that individual to reduce their pension. So based upon that thought that I put out right there, it's going to be very, very interesting how these individuals are going to vote. And so I ask you, although I'm sure, and I may be wrong in assuming, you're not judges, but would you vote to reduce your own pension now? Would you vote to cut your own health care? Would you vote for anything that would be adverse to your own personal interests?
No.
Can I hear that last answer one more time?
No.
There we go. So what we're looking at essentially is a huge battle, a very large battle. But based upon this last battle, that's whether or not we know if this war will be won. So that's one front. That's one front in terms of whether or not your pensions are going to be secure. The other is something that you can do yourselves. Based upon me surveying the land and looking in this room, I can tell that there are quite a few individuals that are not here that probably should be here.
Yes.
And based on the individuals that should be here that are not here, one of the things that we can do is we need to change the debate. We need to change the way that pensions are viewed. We need to change the way that people talk about pensions. We need to change the language that we use when we describe public sector employees. If you notice from the mission instructor sheet, members of UIC actually voted in January to use the term public service providers. Individuals who work for the state provide a serious service that can't be compared to any other. The private sector is not asked to contribute 20 to 25 to 30 years of their life in one particular area. Many individuals in the private sector bounce from job to job to job. Not only that, but their particular job, while it may be important, arguably doesn't have the same impact on individuals who are educating our public, educating our children, making sure that essential services are running for state and local government, making sure that we're able to function comfortably. So it's important that when we talk about the public sector, we talk about the service that is provided. And based on another handout that you should have, which should be titled UIC Outreach, the UIC Outreach Group, Fighting Negative Pension Perceptions, One Retiree at a Time. This is a group that was recently started, recently initiated, and all of the members on the UIC Steering Committee and Advisory Council have nominated 3 to 4 individuals from their membership that have joined the UIC Outreach Group. The purpose of the outreach group is to put a face with the retiree. The retiree that is commonly referred to in the newspaper as a double dipper, as a millionaire, as a thief, an entitled individual who just receives checks and stuffs them in their mattresses and doesn't contribute anything to society. We need to put a face on that particular person. We need to make sure that members who support the Illinois is Broke campaign understand why propaganda spreads fear and does nothing to solve the actual problem. So members of the UIC Outreach Group are currently going through media training, and they're being UICerized, if that's a word, to make sure that they're changing the debate by changing their own thinking. No longer is it okay to just respond to an attack based on emotion, but you have to respond based on fact. You have to respond to a call for an unconstitutional act with state precedent, with laws that have already taken place that have struck down that same similar action. We have to make sure that people understand that 78% of public service providers do not receive Social Security. 78%. And if an individual is receiving Social Security and a state or local pension, that individual will be hit with an offset. A government pension offset or a windfall elimination provision. The private sector, for whatever reason, doesn't understand that their employer-sponsored benefit and Social Security are ultimately a double-dipping experience. It's a multiple pension that those within the public sector are not entitled to. These particular facts, albeit they're very, very simple, are something that need to be hammered on again and again and again, so that individuals who write these op-ed pieces understand so that reporters who ask these pertinent questions of legislators understand, so that individuals who dedicate the majority of their time towards blogs and writing on message boards understand that there are facts out there that are actually pertinent to this debate. And so at this point, I want to make sure that everyone is aware that these few handouts that you've seen are only the tip of the iceberg. The majority of the information from UIC is on our website. So here's a plug for our website. That website is www.ilretirementsecurity.org. And I've gone to great pains that if you put in retirementsecurity.com, it will still take you to the same website. But it is a fantastic website with other handouts, such as, is your check in the mail? An explanation of why retirement systems sell assets and why now is not the time to panic. Another sheet is appropriately titled, Another Side of Reform, Mandated Funding, and it actually compares the two reforms that have passed within the General Assembly as of late. It compares the reform for state and local public employees under Public Act 960889, and it compares the reform that took place for police and fire under Public Act 961495. There is a bevy, an array, a smorgasbord of information on the UIC website. And if, for those of you that are internet inclined, and for those of you that are on Facebook, and for those of you that Twitter, I have good news and bad news. The good news is that UIC has a Facebook page, and there is tons of information on that page. And so the best thing that you can do if you have a Facebook page is you can share the status. Share a positive headline with someone else who may share it with 5 other people, who may share it with 10 other people. By the end of the day, not only have we changed the focus and we've changed the debate, but now we have 50 individuals who have received positive information on pensions by just a click of a button. The bad news is that we do not have a Twitter feed right now. I'm working with members of our UIC outreach group. For one of them, I'm hoping to start a Twitter page so we can tweet and respond to information that way. Social media is extremely important. One of the things that the Illinois is Broke campaign has been able to do, not only have they been able to raise a significant amount of money, but they have been able to capitalize off of social media as well. So they tweet constantly. I believe they have a Facebook page, and they are capturing the audiences. They're actually capturing the attention of young individuals as well. Those of you that are familiar with the campaign are familiar with the caricature of Abraham Lincoln unfolding his pockets. What we have to do is we have to make sure that individuals see that symbol and understand, no, that it's really a joke. It doesn't speak to the seriousness or the heart of the matter, and that there are real individuals being affected by these types of campaigns. Your former teacher, your grandparent, your librarian, the individual, your mailman. There are individuals that you see on every day, every walk of life, who are being affected by the reduction in benefits. So to wrap up, I'll conclude with this. If you are currently retired, your pensions are safe. If you are nearing retirement, your pensions are safe. Individuals who really, truly have a serious concern or worry are those new hires that these reforms currently are after. The new hires that will be coming in 5, 10, 20 years from now, who won't be able to retire for another 30, 35, or 40 years based on the changes that we're making today. So I hope I've answered your questions. I hope you have questions for me, and I thank you for staying awake and being a great audience. Thank you.
I have two quick questions. One two examples. I would like for you to give us a third example, and that is what would be the amount raised at the current income tax system.
I'm going to have to run some numbers for you based upon the tax increase that passed earlier this year. We have to go in and run the numbers over the individuals that are currently retired and come up with a hypothetical figure. So afterwards, if you want to exchange cards, then I can email you or I can call you with that
I would
figure.
suggest, in fairness, that you add that information
Okay.
to your email. Second question, on the COLA, I may be wrong about this, and I'd like to know whether I'm wrong. My understanding is that part of our contribution to SERS pays for the COLA.
That's correct.
Is that correct?
That's correct. That still doesn't stop a particular member of the General Assembly in introducing legislation to still reduce it or eliminate it, but you're absolutely right, your contribution does pay for your COLA.
In that regard, with the federal pension protection clause,
That is one.
contract protection clause, protect the COLA.
That's what is currently being researched. We don't have a final answer on that yet. So far, we're just sticking to that being a part of something that's protected by the Illinois Constitution.
Yes, are there any plans for your organization to run a counter ad against this Illinois book that they're running on the radio every single day, WGN, about pensions, or good ad and everything?
They're also running ads on ESPN, so they're capitalizing off of the demographic that lives, eats, and breathes sports. What we would like to do as an organization, we would like to respond to those ads. Our individual board members, their organizations have their own ads that they're currently running. They've purchased ad space on the capitalfactsblog.com. In the future, that's something that we'd like to do. The reality is we don't have the funding that the Illinois is Broke campaign has. I mean, it's a multi-million-dollar machine. So hopefully someone will hear that question and they'll donate money.
Dick,
Thank you, Bukola. That I think was a very excellent presentation. I have a couple of questions about the organization.
Sure.
One thing I noticed that SUAA is not part of the steering committee, number one.
Mm-hmm.
Number two is I know a lot of us have received information or requests to join AFSCME. And I think we all perhaps got letters. And a number of people joined AFSCME, and that's a big, powerful union, but it doesn't seem to be participating. That's my second question. And then the third part of it is, are the organizations here pretty much on the same page?
Okay, the first question was SUAA's absence from the steering committee. That was the first one. SUAA actually serves on the advisory council. Linda is the chair of the advisory council and subsequently serves on the executive committee. So the executive committee is not listed, but that's the true brainchild of the organization. So in order to protect various interests, the executive committee members are not listed. The second question was regarding, was it the Ask Me question? That was the second one?
that was the third one.
We can answer that out of sequence.
Retired,
I'll answer the Ask Me question. Originally, when Ursi was,
The third question was, are the people listed, the groups listed on the same page?
right.
The AFSCME question was number two.
Okay, so good, we're on the same page. The second question regarding Ask Me, originally when Ursi was created in 2006, it was comprised of the IFT, the Illinois Federation of Teachers, the IEA, the Illinois Education Association, SEIU, Service Employees International Union, and AFSCME, which is a very, very long abbreviation. But AFSCME was a part of the original steering committee. As of late, AFSCME actually dropped off of Ursi. There are other initiatives that they wanted to embark upon, and this falls into your third question, in order to keep everyone on the same page and to keep everyone in agreement, there are just certain things that we as an organization, UIC, cannot do. And so we're hoping that later on, actually, we'll be able to come back and serve in their capacity that they did before. But in order to keep everyone on the same page, there are certain things that, as a coalition, we just can't do. Yes.
Well, where does your funding come from? And the second part is, how seriously are you taken by legislators? You know, to what degree do they really embrace what you produce?
Okay. So the first question, our funding. Currently, we're subsidized by the Center for Tax and Budget Accountability. UIC is a project of the Center for Tax and Budget Accountability. However, we also receive some of our funding from grants and from the various organizations who are listed on the mission and structure sheet. In terms of how well received is UIC by members of the General Assembly, and I have to tell you that I've taken my role as the director extremely seriously, and I do not approach any legislator without an arsenal of fact sheets and information. So, based upon that fact alone, they receive us quite well. They know that we're approaching them from a public policy standpoint. I made it very clear that we understand how your constituents want you to vote. It's important that you understand the implications behind your vote and what happens 10, 20, or 30 years from now based on your vote. So it's very, very serious, because we're not just saying vote no on this particular piece of legislation. We're meeting with them and we're saying, here are the facts. You can either go left or you can go right, but at least you can't say you were unaware of what would happen, and you can't say you don't understand why constituents are calling you upset based on your vote. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you for your presentation. I'm able to sleep a little bit better tonight. Question, in the year past, there's been attempts to open up the Constitution to amend certain changes. Will there be any worry or concern about that going forward with changes to the Constitution in this regard?
The constitutional amendment or a constitutional convention has actually been brought up several times by certain senators. Senator Kwame Raoul has actually tried quite a few times to get things on the ballot, to even drum up the support for another con-con. Unfortunately, it hasn't happened. So you're met with resistance on one end to get these constitutionalities opened up to inquire more discussion. On the other hand, that's why there's such a push for litigation. There are some members that actually want to push this to the courts so that the courts can decide and we can be done with this issue once and for all.
Yes.
Almost 100% of the same. There isn't any litigation that comes through with these laws that are adverse to the pensions. Don't they do, which would, to me, they would save money and overall, and that is use of trial, changing guards, number one, and or the judges, number two, and leave the other pensions alone, which could then rely on the results of the litigation from those two pension systems. Why open up a whole can of worms, causing, as I said before, a mass exodus of people once these laws get passed?
That's an excellent question, and there's actually been legislation introduced and passed that actually legislates or mandates a trial balloon of changing GARs and changing the judges' retirement system. The problem is, this is just the tip of the iceberg, and those pieces of legislation are essentially gateways. Once you open the gate and you allow the changing of one system to take place, essentially it'll spill over and the next system will take place. The other problem is that the judges' retirement system has between, I don't know, off the top of my head, the last time I looked at the numbers, it's below 15 members. The General Assembly, that's a larger system, but their membership is not nearly as large as CSRS or the state employees. So what you have essentially is, if you do this trial balloon and it works, then the argument is it worked for these two funds. we're gonna go ahead and change it for the others. And so you have two various arguments. One is to change those two systems, as you said, and the other is to push it towards legislation. You know that all members of the General Assembly, all 177 members, don't think alike, and they're all trying to make sure that they're the solution finder for the pension problem.
If I get a spot on that, I mean, I think you're missing, I realize that those two systems are missed compared to the other systems that we've doing that, at least would not affect thousands of people who are going to jump if they think that their pensions are in trouble if they remain as current employees. Doing that, even though it's a minuscule number of people, would allow there to be legal precedent set either one way or another. And since litigation is going to occur, I would assume within the next month or laws are going to be passed adversely affecting pensions in other areas that are of concern to us. The next month or two, why wouldn't a responsible legislator, if there is such a thing, just do it for something that you could actually rely on the precedent created from?
Why don't you direct your concern to Mr. Madigan or Mr. Heller?
Well, and I would say I can't speak on behalf of a legislator. I mean, I can say that they're put in a very difficult position. And I'm sure you're aware that in 2002, there was an early retirement incentive that was offered to quite a few employees, and there was a huge mass exodus of state and local government employees that left government and took the buyout. So again, you have two different ideals here. You have one ideal that's pushing strongly for litigation, and you have another ideal that's saying, let's do a means test, let's do a trial balloon, let's see what happens. But you have these two ideals working concurrently, and so it's a part of the problem. I would suggest maybe a letter.
I have to worry, so.
I'm sure.
Dr. Barnett?
Illinois has major budget problems. These problems will not be solved in 1 year,
That's correct.
and they may even be exacerbated for a variety of reasons. The pension system is likely also not to be something to be solved in 1 year. But the state could raise some money by either playing with the pensions one way or another, adding health care or even adding a tax. But what do you see in terms of a multi-year approach to playing, and I use the word in quotes, manipulating is another one, the pension system, the healthcare system, the taxation of pensions over, say, a 1 to 5 year period? In other words, what on June 30th is the legislature likely to come up with to affect 212, and then next year 13, etc.?
So a plain stump the teacher. Okay. I would say that currently the discussions are in the works that are manipulating or playing around with these various scenarios that you've listed. There are a few things that are working against all of us right now, all of us, including members of the General Assembly. They are supposed to adjourn on May 31st. They are redrawing their maps as we speak, as we're sitting here, as we're breathing. So these particular members have to become acquainted with a whole new set of constituents in time. So the scenarios that you've listed out could possibly impact whether or not they're able to keep those seats. So I would say that the trial balloons are a way of doing that, in a subtle fashion, but we have to remember that this is politics, and the politics are they need to keep their seats, and they're redrawing the map. So it's a bit iffy, and I'm not sure if I've answered your questions, but we can talk more offline when I'm not being recorded.
This may be a naive question, but for those people who are already retired, we were given charts that said if you retire at this point, you get this much, and if you do this and that, and various. Well, if they were to change the Constitution and change our existing pensions, wouldn't that be fraud in a way?
I'm going to say, based on the fact that I haven't seen the chart.
Well, when we are hired, we're given these things that if you
Right.
retire at 55, you get this much, if you're 65.
So based upon your employment, there was a contractual agreement that said if you work a certain number of years, By the end of that tenured period, you are to receive X amount. If they change the rules, and I'm being very basic, putting this in layman terms, if they change the rules and you no longer are receiving X, but you're receiving Y, it can be argued in court that that is a matter of possible fraud, and again, it's unconstitutional. Breach of contract, direct, exactly. But we would have to get to that point. Ultimately, they would have to get to that point. But really, if you're already retired, the main thing that they can really do is in terms of your health insurance and the COLA. They can't necessarily touch the pension.
I have one or two questions. First is about the status of the appeal by AFSCME over the dental insurance premium that was imposed unilaterally by Governor Quinn a year and a half or 2 years ago, lost in binding arbitration, and is now under lawsuit in the courts, I believe. Do you know the status of that?
I currently am not aware of the status of that. I would have to check with a few members on my board, and I can get back to you. I want to make sure I'm giving you factual information.
Okay. Also, I don't see the state of Florida here in this list of states that don't take public or private pension. Is that purposeful?
Talking about government pensions?
Public or private pension income? There's three listed here.
Based upon the National Conference of State Legislatures, they were not listed.
Well, my understanding was Florida doesn't tax retirement. I don't.
And based upon the, they do not. Okay.
This is something we looked at recently.
I'll have to go back and check the chart. They updated their new chart that they had for state personal income taxes on pensions and retirement income for 2010.
Since Florida is a likely destination.
Right, for many individuals. Income tax.
Also, would you care to speculate on whether the state pension funds will run out of money altogether, assuming they don't restore the unfunded liability?
That's a very popular question. I know that the Chicago Tribune kind of ran with the scenario of the systems are going to have to sell assets, and once they sell all their assets, they're not going to be able to pay checks. Essentially, they're not going to be able to send out checks. The problem with that scenario is you have investment income. You have returns on investments. And based upon the multiple investments that are out there in the various asset classes, you have small cap, large cap, hedge funds, money markets, all these various allocations. They're always generating money. They may not be a large return. It may be a 1% return, a 2% return, it may be up to 13 and above, but they're always generating income. Another issue is you have a cycle. You have individuals who enter the system and you have individuals who leave the system. But unless everything stops, individuals stop coming into the system and individuals all leave and there's no investment income, then the scenario of the system's running out of money is just very, very absurd. And it's a scare tactic. It's just not going to happen.
Yes.
My understanding is that the language was put in the Constitution in 1970 because before that the state had reneged on pension promises.
That's correct.
They're obviously incapable of managing this. So why for the new hires, did they not just change it that new hires go into Social Security and get 401ks? Why did they stay in the business that they cannot manage?
That's a two-part question. The issue of the Social Security really brings in IRS implications, and now you're dealing with federal implications on top of that. Going into a 401k system is actually quite expensive for the state. For the state that's already in the red, you're dealing with new administrative costs, you're dealing with educating individuals on how to properly choose various investments. It's a very costly program. So for a system like SURS that already has a self-managed plan, and that's been in play for quite some time, it works. But introducing that into the other systems is going to take far more resources than the state actually has. And in terms of being able to manage the problem, and that actually going to play in 1970, well, from what I said earlier, there have been attempts to open this issue up. They've failed. I won't say that it's unmanageable. I'll say that there are options out there that are on the table. Some are better than others.
Yes.
I'm not sure that it's been a management problem, no. I think it's a matter of the legislature not providing what they said they would provide.
That's better coming from you than from me. That's better coming from you than from me.
Yes, last question, Betty.
Okay, well, along with what Dick just said, now I remember a long time ago when I was in the benefits center, we'd go to SURS meetings, and they always got awards for being so terribly well run. So it's not a question of they're not being well run, they just don't have any money to run. That's,
Well, that's kind of what I meant.
Yeah.
The state's not willing to do this. I know SURS is very well.
Well, I want to thank Bukola for her excellent and informative. Thank you very much. We're going to be serving lunch for those of you who have prepaid. Just simply step out into the hall across the hall to the doors facing here. Thank you all for coming.
thanks, Carol.